This presentation looks to give you an overview of Welsh Government's Future Generations Bill, formerly the Sustainable Development Bill, Better Choices for a Better Future. The main purpose of the presentation is to start thinking about what the duty will entail and to look at some of the practicalities that Blaenau Gwent County Borough Council and strategic leaders of other public organisations will need to consider. This presentation looks to cover what sustainable development is and what it means within the context of Welsh Government's vision for the people of Wales and, importantly, for Blaenau Gwent residents. The bill itself, what it looks to achieve, what the key requirements are, and why we need to legislate. Building on this, we will then look at the journey facing the public sector and will highlight some of the bill's proposals for practical consideration against Blaenau Gwent's current position. Next steps. This will look at where we plan to go from here. So what are the key actions which need to be undertaken to move this agenda forward, whether that be collaboratively as the local service board or corporately as individual organisations. Finally, the presentation will conclude by highlighting some really positive engagement work which was undertook with Blaenau Gwent's Children's Grand Council, which focused on sustainable development. And we'll show you some of the ideas the children had about how we can make Blaenau Gwent a more sustainable area now and for future generations to come. Sustainable development has increasingly become one of the most prevalent global topics of today. The term was first used back in 1987 by the Blaenau Commission, who described it as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this is one of the most popular definitions. But sustainable development is not something new. Native American Indians, before making any decisions, would always consider the impact their choices had on 7 future generations and the environment, which in terms of the way we make decisions today is an extremely long time frame, the Western world equivalent being between 140 to 220 years. For Wales, the Sustainable Development Journey began back in 1998 under Section 121 of the Government for Wales Act, and historically tended to focus primarily on environmental outcomes, but has evolved up until today and is now much broader. It's broader in that it looks to combat the wicked issues, which are not just green, but are also economically and socially focused. One of the key points outlined by the Future Generations Bill is that decisions need to be informed by an appreciation of the likely effects on each and also the integration between them. We will now watch a short film called The Future We Want, produced by the United Nations Development Programme, which illustrates these points well.
2012 is when leaders and citizens come together to put the world on a new path to a sustainable future for our planet, to ensure that social inclusion, economic growth, and a clean and secure environment go hand in hand. To go beyond economic wealth as the only measure of progress. Sustainable development means meeting the needs of today and ensuring we can meet those of generations to come. Lifting people out of poverty while protecting the planet's resources. It means equal opportunity, decent jobs, safe drinking water, sufficient food, quality healthcare, and education, access to energy for all. Sustainable human development means a more secure world. This is the future we want.
The Council is a member of Blaenau Gwent's Local Service Board. Local service boards are where the leaders of local public and third sector organisations come together to take collective action to ensure public services are effective and citizen-focused. The role of local service boards across Wales will be to put Wales on a sustainable path and to strengthen public services so that they can become more effective in collaboratively improving and delivering cross-cutting outcomes for citizens. In Welsh Government's Programme for Government, First Minister Carwyn Jones emphasises the outcomes we are working towards, including healthy people living productive lives in a more prosperous and innovative economy, safer and more cohesive communities with lower levels of poverty and greater equality, a resilient environment with more sustainable use of our natural resources, and a society with a vital sense of its own culture and heritage. But there's also another angle. Welsh Assembly member Jeff Cuthbert, who is the Minister for Communities and Tackling Poverty, whose portfolio includes a cross-cutting responsibility for sustainable development, stated that with regards to the issue of poverty, we're not attempting to tackle it just because it's right, but actually it makes economic sense to do so. However, tackling the problem will require integrated and preventative action, which is at the heart of the sustainable development approach. Keeping all this in mind, we can see there is a strong commitment to ensure sustainable development becomes the central organising principle of Welsh Government and other public bodies in Wales. Another part of the bill includes creating an independent sustainable development body as part of this legislation. The Sustainable Development Bill aims to raise the profile of key long-term challenges and big trends which are imminent, such as ageing population, lack of jobs, health inequality and climate change. The Future Generations Bill is due to be launched summer 2014. Why is it significant? Well, if we quickly consider our journey as public services over the past years, we can see we have entered a time of increasing challenge and change, with the economic climate and other factors put increasing pressures on public services to be able to deliver. With reducing budgets and rising expectations, it was no longer sustainable for public service organisations to continue as they were, resulting with the need to rationalise existing partnerships and plans and to develop and deliver single integrated plans. The Single Integrated Plan is the document that will frame public, private and voluntary sector activity in Blaenau Gwent over the period 2013 to 2017. It describes the issues that are important to Blaenau Gwent and identifies the approach that a range of organisations will adopt in attempting to tackle them. The Single Integrated Plan is for everyone who lives in, visits or has an interest in Blaenau Gwent. It has been prepared for a range of audiences, for Blaenau Gwent residents, for the organisations that serve Blaenau Gwent, and as a means of communicating our priorities to external agencies and the Welsh Government. Blaenau Gwent's Single Integrated Plan will become the testbed for sustainable development moving forward. The Local Service Board's role will be key in supporting and leading the delivery of the Single Integrated Plan and driving forward better outcomes for citizens now and in the future, with a specific focus on improving the strategic decision-making processes, something which the bill looks to support. One of the main focuses of the bill is about strengthening the governance framework in Wales. Welsh Government have designed a governance model which is intelligence-led, based on sound evidence and information, which helps shape the collaborative partnership activities we undertake, which also consider the now and the long term. The policy intent is that Sustainable Development Proposal consolidates the framework for local public service organisations to undertake integrated planning and to be held accountable for collaborative working. As it stands, we are integrating because we can see the added value in it. The bill will actually legislate this. In order for the framework to be successful, public services will also need to ensure that decisions taken individually or corporately align collectively through integrated planning. The model requires organisations to be transparent in the way it measures and records the differences made. This results-based model focuses on achieving outcomes now in the short term, but also requires organisations to look towards achieving long-term results. There is also a shift in approach in that the model requires organisations to switch to fixing the causes of problems rather than the symptoms themselves, turning towards preventative early intervention modes of action. It's clear from looking at the model that Blaenau single integrated plan will be the obvious vehicle for embedding sustainable development, and that the governance framework model complements the existing strategic partnership framework. Whilst the ownership of single integrated plans lies with local service boards, it was clear from the Future Generations Bill that there needs to be a clear line of sight between corporate plans and the single integrated plan for effective delivery. The White Paper outlined a phased implementation of the bill, with most local service board partners needing to implement the duty by 2016, except registered social landlords in 2017. Welsh Government will be looking to set the precedent by going first in 2015. However, this is still subject to change. So what are some of the key requirements of the Future Generations Bill? Well, it looks to support the embedding of sustainable development as the central organising principle of public services in Wales. What this means is there needs to be a clear focus on what the organisation is seeking to deliver in support of the future well-being of Wales, ensuring decisions taken on how the outcomes can be achieved are fully informed by consideration of the effect on social, economic and also long-term well-being. It looks to empower and drive positive change, whilst avoiding adding layers of additional bureaucracy and cost. Therefore, it should not become a tick-box exercise. It looks to avoid stifling innovation and removing the flexibility from organisations to reach solutions that are best for their circumstances. So it's worth noting that the legislation is not going to be prescriptive in how organisations make decisions, as every organisation will have their own detailed processes and systems of doing that. The duty will look to apply to those key strategic decision-making processes that have a role in contributing towards sustainable development. And finally, it looks to ensure sustainable development has a practical effect, and is not simply a set of high-level principles. So what does the Future Generations Bill look to achieve? What are some of the reasons to legislate? So the potential integrated planning aspects that look to be secured by the Future Generations Bill includes driving public sector reform, simplifying existing duties, ensuring there is a mechanism for sustainable development at the local level, but most importantly, it means putting local service boards on a statutory footing. Welsh Government wrote out to all local service boards across Wales, requesting that they consider a list of key things for practical consideration as part of the Future Generations Bill. Some things for practical consideration includes 1. Simplifying existing legislation. Blaenau's single integrated plan already demonstrates this. 2. Align the strategic planning cycle with the electoral cycle. 3. partnership planning and commissioning is evidence-based and performance management is focused on outcomes. Blaenau Gwent's single integrated plan uses a results-based accountability approach, which looks to lead to more effective planning. The single integrated plan will be a testbed for initiation. However, certain areas require more development work, one being commissioning. Further things for practical consideration include 4. Making local service boards statutory without additional running costs. Blaenau Gwent has already begun their journey, and this is something which is achievable. 5. Enable groups of local service boards to form delivery groups to undertake strategic commissioning functions. Again, this is another logical step, and already Blaenau Gwent has been involved in a variety of collaborative regional projects, such as the Headvan project and the Developing Vulnerability Intelligence. 6. Ensuring partnership working is subject to cross-cutting duties, such as the Equalities Duty. Any new policy developments will be captured by partnership support components contained within Blaenau Gwent's strategic partnership framework. 7. Strengthen accountability and scrutiny of integrated plans. There are issues around accountability for those who are not involved, for example Gwent Police. Welsh Government are currently in discussions with the Home Office. Again, this is another area for further development. If we consider Blaenau Gwent's journey, we are currently in a really good position to be able to implement the proposals set out in Welsh Government's Future Generations Bill. Blaenau Gwent already has a long-term community plan called Making a Difference, the Big 20-Year Plan, which sets out long-term outcomes and goals up until 2030. Our journey for developing Blaenau Gwent's single integrated plan began here and has led to our current position today. Blaenau Gwent's community strategy outlines 10 high-level outcomes it looks to achieve by 2030. These include people in Blaenau Gwent live in good quality, affordable homes. Blaenau Gwent is an accessible place with a good transport infrastructure. Blaenau Gwent has a thriving economy. People in Blaenau Gwent are supported to live free from poverty. Blaenau Gwent is a safe place where people feel safe. Blaenau Gwent is a fair and inclusive place. People in Blaenau Gwent reach their full lifelong learning potential. People in Blaenau Gwent lead healthy and independent lives. Blaenau Gwent has a green and sustainable environment. People in Blaenau Gwent are involved in their communities and feel they can make a difference. These high-level outcomes align with the priorities set out in Blaenau Gwent's single integrated plan. As the name suggests, the Future Generations Bill is about taking account of our future. One way to do this is by future casting, which means looking at how impending long-term trends are being factored into our decision-making processes. For example, are decisions being made now considering long-term effects? If we take an area such as emergency planning, where every detail is considered as to if this happens, this is the action we will take, even though we know there is very limited probability of that situation ever happening, it's done because it's in legislation. However, when it comes to the way we currently plan to deliver public services, historically we have tended to be more reactive rather than preventative, and have focused more on the now rather than worry about the impending trends as and when they arrive. Let's consider ageing population as a long-term trend. We know that by 2030, the ageing population is going to cause a significant change to Blaenau Gwent's population dynamics. Are we as public service organisations factoring these long-term trends into our current planning and strategic decision-making processes. Read all about it. Blaenau Gwent's policy and research team created mock newspaper headlines which take into account long-term trends and the potential impact they could have on Blaenau Gwent as an area. 2010, Blaenau Gwent launches its community strategy. 2014, carbon footprint becomes a reality. 2016, new Heads of the Valleys Road improves Blaenau Gwent's infrastructure. 2020, pension age people in Blaenau Gwent hit record proportion. Will services suffer? 2024, flood strike Blaenau Gwent, Cwm worst affected. 2025, health services stretched to deal with the legacy of obesity. 2028, Blaenau Gwent taps into water industry. The next key steps for Blaenau Gwent's Local Service Board and for Blaenau Gwent County Borough Council will be to ensure that there is the necessary representation at national and regional engagement seminars which are being held to discuss the Future Generations Bill. The White Paper also outlined that achieving sustainable development is a shared responsibility. Therefore, public sector organisations will need to ensure that there is alignment between corporate plans and with strategic plans. Beginning our preparations for the Future Generations Bill, it would be good to reflect on our current position and to identify where there are areas for further development, including lessons and experiences which can be learnt from across the UK and even globally in terms of best practice models. This will enable us to be in a good position to start preparing and planning for the implementation of the statutory guidance. Blaenau Gwent's policy and research team have identified an implementation model for mainstreaming sustainable development corporately, the principles of which could be adapted for local service board use. The model uses key building blocks including leadership, learning, culture, know-how, governance, tools and resources. Finally, the presentation concludes by sharing some really positive engagement work which was undertaken by Blaenau Gwent's Children's Grand Council. Over 50 children representing Blaenau Gwent primary schools attended the Children's Grand Council event, The Future We Want, held at Llanelwedd Institute, Abertillery in April 2013. The day gave young people the opportunity to learn about sustainable development and what it means to them and their community. All the children really enjoyed a range of interactive activities that were put on for them, including workshops, table discussions, and even a visit to the Big Brother style diary pod to voice their ideas. When asked what is sustainable development, the children came back with some really good ideas. For example, sustainable development is making a better future happen. Sustainable development is improving life and environment. The children learnt about the Rio Plus 20 Youth Blast and what 3,000 young people from many different countries told world leaders about what would make the world a better place now and in the future. We then gave the children a chance to tell us their ideas on how we could make the Earth and Blaenau Gwent a more sustainable place to live. As you can see from the diagram, protecting the environment as expected was top of their list. And there was also a similar picture for Blaenau Gwent, although interestingly, health and poverty were also mentioned. It is no surprise that the environment features heavily within schools' educational programmes. However, there's a key message there that we need to ensure that the other key components of sustainable development are also covered to ensure there is a balance. To broaden the children's understanding of sustainable development to include the social and economic aspects, we then run some activities based on 5 themes of Blaenau Gwent's single integrated plan. The children were then asked to think about good or bad decisions that they could make about health, learning, jobs, safety and homes. We then emphasised how making the right choices can enhance their well-being now and also in the future. To conclude, the key point is that sustainable development is a shared responsibility. The Future Generations Bill will require public service organisations across Wales to consider the social, economic and environmental aspects in making the best choices for the future, based on sound evidence. This will only be achieved by mainstreaming sustainable development within our organisation. The Future Generations Bill is a game changer in that it looks to provide the legislative mechanism for putting single integrated plans on a statutory footing, creating a stronger governance framework, and will become the mechanism for mainstreaming and delivering sustainable development at the local level, whereby decisions taken will demonstrate real outcomes. The vision is that the bill will drive forward public sector reform and will further encourage public services to look at the way it tackles the wicked issues, encouraging the development of intelligence-led, citizen-centred services which look to break cycles of dependency and shift towards early intervention and prevention models. Strategic leaders of public service organisations will be responsible for helping us to take this shared agenda forward through the delivery of Blaenau Gwent's single integrated plan. Blaenau Gwent's single integrated plan will look to tackle 18 key priorities for the area, which can be seen here. But importantly, we'll also consider the long term and how we can make Blaenau Gwent a better place for future generations to come.